here to talk about Bourdieu's social theory and the applications of that social. This was a bad idea. There is a zoom here, right? Let's do that. And its applications to tech, right? So, who here have ever heard about Bourdieu? Okay, and keep your hand if you heard about Bourdieu's social theory. Okay, so let's do this. I have a few disclaimers I'm trying to give with this talk, so you people are not frustrated, right? The first one is, this is a Kaizen, this is continuous improvement. There is, you may feel during this talk that I'm just bashing our industry. I'm not. I mean, our industry is a trash fire, but I'm not bashing our industry. The things we do today is the best solution we had up until this point, and can always do better. And that's my main point. You can always do better. And the only thing I'm trying to do here is show one way that we can help ourselves do a little bit better. This is not to spit on the current methods we have, the current ways we have. Okay? Second, I am not a sociologist or a philosopher. I'm just a geek that happens to have read Bourdieu, right? So if you do have some real expertise on this, maybe you find very crude errors in my ways, please correct me, raise your hand and tell me, right? This is just an experiment. And third, what I'm explaining to you today is a model. All models are wrong. A map of France, the size of France, is useful to no one. All models are wrong. Some models are useful. I've happened to find this model to be useful. Okay? Okay. So, oh yeah, no, this is later. So, talking about symbolic violence, talking about corpus and hexis. None of this will make sense up to in this point, don't worry. And we talk about, in this talk, we talk about cultural and social capital. And we talk about interactions of those three with agile methods. Make sense? Okay, you liars. It makes no sense. I mean, if you don't know about this, right? So, why I started doing this? Because some times ago, there is this amazing person in the interwebs called Sarah May. I don't know if you heard about her, but if you haven't, it's not very important to the talk. She did a thread on Twitter, is a site you may have heard about, and she talked about power dynamics in pair programming. And I immediately got hit because I was a fan of Bourdieu's social theory, and I was a fan of pair programming, and I never put the two together. And by reading her thread, I immediately got, oh my God, she's talking about Bourdieu's social theory applied to tech. She did not realize that because she did not know Bourdieu at all. But everything she was talking about was about that. And I set myself to try to do a basically identical thread, but through the prism of Bourdieu's social theory, which I did. And her thread was attacked by a lot of people online. And my thread was praised by a lot of people online. And sometimes the same people were praising my thread and attacking her thread, although we were talking about the same stuff with the same conclusions. And I found that very interesting. And I thought it was important to talk about Bourdieu society theory with more geeks. Make sense? Okay, so Pierre Bourdieu is a sexy guy. Was, he's dead. I mean, one of the sexiest the philosophers just behind Foucault. Because, I mean, right. So, he tried to explain a prism where he could look at the society around you. I mean, sociologists usually do that. And he created a model. We've had an infinite number of little, I'll call this a spaghetti place, right? Spaghetti? This presentation will contain typos. Right? It's kind of a dish of spaghetti. And I will just take, today with you, I will just take out 3 little spaghetti strands and talk about those. And of course, in real life, they are incredibly intertwined between them. But I'll just take out 3 and talk about those 3. Make sense? So those are the 3 I picked for no specific reason. Symbolic violence, corpus and hexis, and cultural social capital. Okay? I'll start with symbolic violence. Each one of us, the whole humanity, has, in Bourdieu social theory, an icon of who should be in power. You had this image in your head of it is normal that this kind of person has power. And that icon evolves over millennia, of centuries. Like in some centuries ago, being fat was seen as being powerful, right? And today is no longer the case. So it evolves over time. But we have this image in your head, pretty much shared, that we were not born with, and that we discover, we are trained, conditioned over time to interiorize about who should be in power. And there has an infinite number of traits to that image, right? You have traits like conformant dress, yes? Traits like accessories. Sorry, this was a bad click. Oh, doesn't work. Okay. So traits like accessories. There are traits in diction, right? Traits in diction, a specific kind of diction. I had a friend of mine that he had a talk in this very conference, Matthias Verais. And we know each other a lot, and we were eating the other day, and we're discussing about event storming. But he corrected me because I pronounce events events, because French. And he pronounces events. And he told me, I found this strange because although I know I find you to be a very smart person, when you use an English that I consider to be bad, immediately part of me starts categorizing you as being lesser, right? And language is incredibly arbitrary, yet we have a specific vision of what locution should be considered as powerful. What positions in your body, you have this whole power stance movement, right? I mean, power. No, maybe not. Anyway, but there are some. And you have things like a specific color of skin that is perceived as being more powerful, or a specific thing, and things like that, right? That's perceived as being more powerful. And the more traits you wield, the more you're closer to the icon, and the more you're closer to the icon, the more people will perceive you having that power as more normal. This by itself is not, of course, enough to give you all the power, right? Someone can miss several of those traits, but symbolic violence by itself is not enough to win all the competitions. It's just a big bonus to every dice you throw. And the thing is, having all those traits makes everyone, including you, believe that you are deserving of that power. And make you believe that this other person is more deserving than another one. So someone that has a lot of traits, that speaks more, is normal. Someone that has less traits, that speaks more, is seen as taking too much space. You have a limit to what you can wield of those traits. Some traits you cannot choose at all, right? Like the color of your skin. And some traits you can try to choose. If you have a lot of money, you could buy those traits through sociology and trainings and buying the objects themselves, right? So you could say that, well, money buys this. And actually, no. Money doesn't buy this, because it buys up to a certain point, right? Have you heard about this, My Fair Lady? Right? There is up to a certain point, you can buy symbolic violence. Up to the point you can't. Have you ever saw someone wearing a suit where the person just seemed not to be comfortable in the suit? Right? Like you. And I mean, there are some level where you are comfortable within that level of symbolic violence, and there's some level you are not anymore, and you cannot wield it, no matter how much money you have. And why is symbolic violence violence, right? Why is having those traits violence? That's where it becomes interesting for me. Because what Bourdieu tries to say is symbolic violence is a violence we put on ourselves. So it's not that by putting this suit, I'm increasing how close I am to the icon, right? But it's not by itself this that make you submit a little more to me. It's you are conditioned to submit to people that are closer to the icon. So the person exerting the violence is the person suffering the violence. We condition the whole society to hit on ourselves. Does it make sense? Which means that the person that benefits from the violence has the luxury of not being aware of the violence at all. I can benefit from it and never see the violence happen, because people suffering are the ones executing it. The sufferers have the oppression of receiving, have the toil of executing the violence, and have also the hindrance of not being believed that the violence exists if they try to talk about the plight. And the people benefiting from it, they can live in ignorance of the existence of the violence itself, never seeing it, never feeling it, never asserting it. Yes? For example, yes, actually. And I just trying to draw the picture here, so this is kind of exaggerated. I mean, I'm trying to speak about Bourdieu in 45 minutes, so everything will be kind of exaggerated. But do you see what I'm meaning with all this? Okay. So this is one strand of the spaghetti, the symbolic violence itself. Yeah? Then we have cultural capital, cultural social capital. So the base of cultural capital is that culture, like money, can be capitalized, and that to build any capital, you need capital, and that everything has a price in cultural capital. So, what I mean by that is, once you know things, that know about general culture, right? You can then know other things. You enhance the law. Okay, let's try to give an example of this. Do you live in a city with a lot of museums? Raise your hand. Okay, ever been to a museum and then realized that you could not understand anything? Right. What happened there is that the art there have a prerequisite in cultural capital. There was a culture needed in order to appreciate the exposition at all, right? This happens in cities with lots of museums because they just figure that if you don't know about this, you can go to another museum. Yeah, it's rarer in a city with just one museum because they just figure, hey, we had to take everyone here. Yeah? So you go into a museum and you don't understand any art in it, and then you feel lost. There was a price in what level of culture you needed in order to exceed that other level of culture that you gain from going to the exposition. Yes? Okay. Who here have ever looked at abstract art and say, this is bullshit? Okay, keep your hand if you still believe this is the case. Okay, so 14 years ago, when I arrived some years ago, when I arrived in France for the first time, it was more than 14 years, I looked at Pompidou, and I was like, the modern art is bullshit. I love modern art. Pompidou is my favorite museum aujourd'hui. Pompidou is Museum of Modern Art of Paris. It's my favorite museum aujourd'hui. I go to there almost every week. And, and I love it. But for a huge slice of my life, I was looking at that and saying, this is bullshit. Why? Because I did not have the necessary cultural capital to appreciate the art within. So it just became this strange thing. Abstract art, if I just do an aside here on this, is pretty much about the interactions you have with it. The people in the museum looking at it and saying, this is bullshit, are part of the piece. Your reactions to the art itself are part of the piece. And also you start looking at this meta level, the whole exposition becomes way more interesting and way more challenging. But you need a lot of cultural capital in order to start this path at all, right? And thing is, cultural capital change how you perceive things, how you recognize stuff, and this is awesome. It changes you. Yet, you also perceive very quickly that other people are not perceiving the things you're perceiving, right? You see that someone else does not have your level of cultural capital, and that person, hence, when the person looks at something, it doesn't see the same things that you're seeing. Ever try to describe a movie to a child? Right? Remember children movies? Do you remember children movies? That every character is so ham-fisted, right? Every single character in the children movie, characters in children movies have to be ham-fisted. You have villains that are caricatures, heroes that are caricatures. You only have caricatures. Why? Because children don't have the necessary cultural capital to see all the nuance of something more complex, characters-wise. Right? And you have lived that once, and you assume that at some point in your life you reached adulthood, and you just have all the cultural capital you ever need. No, you don't assume, but I'm characterizing here. And the thing is, it's the same. You have this whole infinite process of you can always have more cultural capital. So why I'm talking about the cultural capital here? Thing is, we use cultural capital to dissociate people in two different ways. One, we see people with less cultural capital as lesser. Doesn't matter how experts they are. That's the beauty of it, right? If you are discussing with someone and you have more cultural capital than the person, but you are discussing about a subject where you are completely ignorant about because you don't know everything, and that person happens to know the subject way more than you, someone outside will still look at you as knowing more about this. Does it make sense? As a matter of fact, if you start talking about the oppressive society we live, but you use this veneer of cultural capital of talking about Bourdieu instead, right? You instantly gain this vision of cultural capital that instills respect. And this changes the relations you have during the whole discussion, right? Which allowed, by my own symbolic violence and the cultural capital of talking about Bourdieu, allowed me to have a thread about oppression being praised, while a white woman not talking about Bourdieu, strangely was being punched by the same conclusions. Yes? Okay. So, cultural capital that changes the way we treat others, because we see that people recognize the things we see, and it's cheaper, it's easier, it's a cognitive load reduction to talk with people that have similar cultural capital to ours. And it takes effort give cultural capital to people that have a lower cultural capital than ours. Even if those people are more expert than us in the subject matters they are expert into, doesn't change anything. And we recognize very quickly people that have similar cultural capital to ours, right? Which brings another point of symbolic violence. The luxury of calmness. So, there is this tweet, I will not try to find it, by Paul Graham, where he said, I don't follow him anymore, sorry, where he said, if you have two people discussion about the subject, the calmer one is the right one. Which is just saying, people that have the privilege of never being bothered by anything happening are righter, right? And this also is in the icon itself. When you look at the icon of power, when you imagine the person that deserves the power, you imagine a person that is in control of their emotions, right? And it manages to be so because there is some distance from the problem itself. So, another problem what it dissociates is that when we see people with a higher cultural capital, this breeds a smallness within us. You perceive yourself as being lesser when you're talking with someone that has a higher cultural capital than you, which pushes you to change the interactions you have with that person. And that person is seeing you as lesser because you have a lower cultural capital than the person. This creates a very neat system, right? Okay, last one. And then we'll talk about the interactions of all this with the ways we work, right? Last spaghetti strand. That's the hardest one, corpus and hexis. So, try to imagine this like an aura. It's not an aura at all, but try to imagine this like an aura, okay? Thing is, you have a lot of non-verbal communications. A lot. The way you pose yourself, the way you act, the way you think. A lot of the things you say, you don't say with words, right? And this is very unconscious. Well, there are some people that train a lot to do this in a conscious level, but this is usually very unconscious, right? And that's your corpus. We call this our corpus. So Bourdieu invented a lot of words for reasons. He actually hated that words already have prescribed meanings in the hearts of people. So if you use a word that you knew already, you have an interpretation of that word. So he created new words in order to avoid that, which gives you words like hexis. Yay, Bourdieu. So corpus for Bourdieu would be all this posture, all this non-verbal communication you have, you bring into the world that speaks volumes about your person. Yes? And one specific kind of corpus I will talk about today. This is an incredibly gross oversimplification of this, but I cannot do this quick if not. Would be hexis. I will call hexis a corpus in which you always belong. So, there's this difference between courage and temerarity, right? What is courage? What is temerarity? So, in courage, you feel the fear and you brave that fear. You see something that you should be afraid of, and you brave that fear and you go against that fear, right? In temerarity, you are not aware of the reasons to be afraid of at all. A small baby is temerary, right? Doesn't know the dangers, can fall over a cliff. Yeah? That's not courage. Yeah? So, we love, this society was constructed about loving self-confidence. But self-confidence is like courage. You ask yourself, do I belong here? And your answer is, yes. Right? You can hack the whole system by conditioning your babies to always believe they belong. Hence, they don't ask the question at all. And as a matter of fact, the question becomes alien to them. They don't understand why people ask themselves the questions of whether or not they belong someplace. Everybody just belongs, right? I was like that. So I am, right? So my ex-wife, she comes from a very poor background, and we entered in malls, right? Shopping malls. And she would go directly to the mall security person to show her a bag. And at the exact moment, I discovered the existence of the mall security person that I probably crossed many times, right? It never occurred to me that maybe I would not belong there. We would sit in restaurants, and I did not want to eat, and they would throw you out, and I was like, why would they ever throw me out because I don't want to consume? What is this idea you have in your mind? Everything was strange in this confusion of words, because she constantly asks herself whether she belongs or not somewhere, and that question never occurred to me. So the thing is, when you are a shopping mall cop, looking at people entering, you're not trying to study every single human being that crosses your path, right? You're looking for deviations of the norm. You're looking for people that looks like they don't belong there. Everybody that looks like they belong there, you just let them pass. Make sense? We do that every time, not only shopping mall guards. Everyone does that all the time. You look for deviations. So people that looks like they don't belong there, or look like they're doubting themselves, they're immediately seen. We see doubt as fragility and fragility as punishable. So someone that just seems very, very, very confident that this is the things we should do, no matter how stupid that idea is, will have a huge bonus towards the idea being followed. Whereas someone that is asking themselves, am I right? Will already immediately be punished because they're asking themselves that question, if the idea is awesome. And that has no correlation with any idea being good. What I try to tell you since the beginning here, just with these three strands of Bourdieu social theory, is that if in your heart you still have the illusion of merit, please kill it now. Kill all illusions of merit. What I try to tell you is that meritocracy is our age's divine mandate of kings. That's my point. And the thing is, now let's go back to the ways we work with. If you're working with someone, and that person, you're trying to work with that person, you're just two devs, or devs or tester, I don't care, and that person happens to be way lower in symbolic violence than you, and happens to be with a higher cultural capital and happens to have a higher access, you are working with your boss in an invisible hierarchy, but you are working with your boss, right? Maybe you are officially that person's boss, but you are working with your boss in an invisible hierarchy. Now, if you are like me, you would say, what's the problem, right? I have worked with my boss several times. Never had a problem. This is the kind of things you think when you have a high level of symbolic violence and cultural capital and hexis, right? As a matter of fact, I never had a boss. I had people that paid my salary, but were they really my boss? So I have to exaggerate things a little bit so you can get this, right? When you work with someone and that person has a way lower level of symbolic violence and cultural capital and social capital and access than you, that person is condemned to hit themselves every time they look at you and interact with you. They are condemned to inflict violence upon themselves in every interaction you have. And it's not their fault, but we condition them to do that. And it's not your fault, but if you are ignorant of that, then you are benefiting from violence all day. And as soon as you understand that, then it becomes chiefly important to try to do something about this. So let's back to agility, right? So agile. Agile. I love agility. I'm not trying to put this on anything here, right? But it was created by 17 white men in a snowbird in 2001, right? And they are lovely people. I mean, not all of them. Like you have like 2 Trump voters, but mostly lovely people, and and they had pretty consistent levels of symbolic violence, of access, and of cultural capital. Right? Very homogeneous group of that. Not completely homogeneous. There is some difference between those, of course, right? I mean, no, I won't go there. And there's some difference between them, but they, compared to the rest of society, they were pretty similar, right? When you are at that level, any solution you create on how people should organize will have the same blind spots. Yeah? They do not take in consideration all this oppression during this because they don't see it. It's not that they are bad per se, they don't see it. So they created a very good way of working between people that have very similar levels of social capital. And I think there is a very, 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 very great opportunity here to look at those blind spots and find what we could improve. That's my point. Yeah? So, what do I mean by that? A pair-programming session where one of the 2 is hitting themselves is no longer a session of pairs. It's no longer peers programming. It was something that was created with that in mind. People will be at the same level. It is no longer people at the same level. So one of the 2 gets a kind of an upper hand, and the other doesn't. And this is bad. Have you ever felt like that in a pair-programming session? Raise your hand, please. Yes, right. So if you are to really achieve that ideal goal of the pair-programming session, then we have to take consideration those differences between us in order to create something that will maybe leverage this out. It will not be perfect. It will not be perfect. but we can improve. A retrospective where you are doing retrospective with your boss is bad, right? I mean, unless you try to retrospect the way you work with your boss. But usually, team retrospective with your boss is a bad idea. Like a daily stand-up with your boss is a bad idea, right? But if you have a boss in an invisible hierarchy within the group, then you no longer have the opportunity to not do it with your boss. And if you look at those hierarchies, if you cannot destroy them, at least we have to take them in consideration. Deconstruct them. If you really want to do pair programming, then you need to look at this. If you really want to do a retrospective, then you need to look at this. And in order to look at this, you need to be able to talk about this, which is the reason I wanted to give you these words, these concepts, so you can at least use them in discussion with people. Because what you can ask me is, Romeu, what will you do to solve this? And my answer would be, ha! So, if I give you a solution, that solution would be made by someone with a high level of symbolic violence, access, and cultural capital. Right? If I refuse to give you a solution, then I condemn people that are currently being oppressed to, let's try to do this. Where was the, to have all this, the oppression of receiving, the toil of executing the violence, the hindrance of not being believed if that exists, and on top of all that, the weight of being alone in that fight against that situation. So it currently looks that I am fucked. And the only solution I see to the problem is, sorry, no. I will have a real answer, but right now, what I wanted to say is the strange game, the only winning move is not to play, right? But no, we don't have the option of not playing that game, right? I will not become an hermit lost out of society. So the only solution I can foresee is co-construction between people of different levels, which is why I do this talk. In order to get you to start having those discussions with people that have a different level from you in those three things. Does it make sense to you? Thank you very much. Any questions? I mean, we stopped filming, right? You can speak now.
How can you have those discussions with people of in different levels of power dynamics if you're on the lower end of the power?
Yeah, right.
Necessarily appreciate being called out.
No, no, that's hard. Okay. I have two answers for that. One is get them to watch the talk, and maybe this will help, I hope. The second is have a network of allies. That it's dangerous to go alone. There is safety in numbers. Yes.
The fact that some people ignore the symbolic violence they exert on others.
We all have some level we ignore, yes.
Yeah, because we all, in some different spaces, exert symbolic violence
Yes.
on other people.
Yeah.
But making those people in a certain space acknowledge the symbolic violence they exert.
That's what I try, yes.
Yeah, but it is in itself violent. Because
Yes. Yes, yeah, yeah. So, yeah.
I really back to the clinic because what you did brilliantly as always show us in the least violent way I could think of. You made us realize we are all in our ways in certain spaces violent to others. But how do you train yourself not to be violent when making people realize the violence they themselves exert? I'm not sure.
I'll try to explain what I understood of your question. What you understood of your question is, Romeo, what was the process you used in order to try to reduce the violence you will have anyway, by showing people they are violent? Because showing people they are violent is in self suffered by them enhanced violence. Yes? The process I use myself is that I exert a huge amount of violence towards my own person, trying to. No, okay, no. Let's do this seriously. This is an enormous amount of trial and error. An enormous amount of trial and error, right? I just try, and I see that people react very badly. Even this talk, I had people react incredibly violent, with incredibly feeling violent by this talk, so I did several iterations, and it keeps doing that and doing that and doing that. So there is no way to avoid beforehand. You can just learn how to react once you did it and try to do better. In the same way that if you misgender someone, there is no point in trying to oppress yourself towards that. You have to apologize, go on, and continue. And I gave up not being violent, and instead of being proactively less violent, I try to be reactively less violent over time. So what means is, when I'm violent towards someone, I don't know it. So when the person says you're being violent towards me, it encumbers to me to listen to the person. If someone is already having the courage to tell me, Romeo, I suffer from your words, I feel you are violent to me, that person is already going to a whole of energy just trying to tell me that. So it becomes a value feedback that I should respect. So I just take those feedbacks a lot. I don't see any other way of doing this. Accepting and embracing that people that tell me I'm fucking up care a lot about me.
You really expect that people on the right side of domination or dominating people in this game will act a goodwill and reduce their violence?
Oh, yeah, thank you. The question becomes, okay, once people realize and have conscience of this, will they not try to use this in their advantage? Some will. I mean, this is, I'm just trying to go out of the gamble that raising the consciousness of most people is a good thing, but I have no proof of that. Some will. And I have to accept that some people will try to fight this, as I am, and as others are, right? But the thing is, I rest at ease with the fact that the level of how much you can increase artificially when you set yourself to do this is actually quite low, right? And as Bourdieu himself would say, when you start looking at things just in the way of, I want to increase my social and cultural capital, you destroy your life completely anyway. So more power to them if they want to try. Yes. Some people will be happy, and some slice of you will be happy that you're not suffering, right? That's human, right? I mean, there is some happiness of, I'm not being oppressed, right? And you can still try to do something, yes?
I'm going to try to rephrase.
Go for it.
Are you not afraid that people that just realize that they have that power are going to use it? They didn't know they had, are going to use it badly?
Yeah, they probably are. I mean, I still think conscience is important, even if some people will use it badly, yes. And I don't think they can do a lot more damage than they do by accident today, anyway. They already do the damage, right? There's that. Yes?
I think there is much ways to think that telling people that this violence exists will do much more benefit in people realizing they are suffering of violence or they're exerting and doing stuff than the power it will give to people being violent unknowingly and expanding this violence.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other things you want to discuss? Any other? Yes, go for it. Indo.
You said, like when you first, like, went to look at modern art, you said this is bullshit.
Yes, at the beginning. I'm so ashamed.
It was a very strong opinion, but then now you like love modern art. So what caused that change? Because
Sorry, I was too quick on that.
yeah.
When I arrived in France, I hated French cuisine. I love it today. I'm a big fan of restaurants. I hated French cuisine because I come from Brazil, right? And Brazilian cooking is highly spicy, not with hot food, but with aromas, right? Because we have bad meat and we hide the quality of the meat with a lot of spices, right? And hence I was used to a level of spices. And then I got to France, and everything just tasted so bland. And after a while, I got used to tasting it, and I started seeing very nuanced flavors in a lot of things, etc., 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 right? It took some months to start feeling those. Over time, I started loving that food, and I started seeing a tapestry of different levels of it. What I mean by that is I increased my cultural capital by experimenting, yes? In the beginning, I thought that all modern art was bullshit. And I started studying modern art. I started discovering how people look at it and what they get out of this, and why does it mean to them. And at the beginning, I was skeptical, but the more I studied this, the more I understood this, the more I got into it little by little. What happened is I increased my cultural capital. And I used my social capital to increase my cultural capital. I used the friends I had that taught me things to increase my cultural capital. In actuality, social capital and cultural capital increase each other very quickly, very easily. And you can use your cultural capital to get friends, and you can use your friends to get culture. And I could lose all my money tomorrow. It would be very easy. I don't have much. But I have no doubts that I could leverage my cultural and social capital in order to regain my financial status. It all feeds into each other. So I used money, and friends in order to acquire the necessary culture that gave me the vision to understand the art. Does this answer your question?
Yes, but if you took the measures to try and learn and educate yourself and surround yourself with friends, as developers sometimes we have very strong preconceived notions of what is right or what our beliefs are.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when we're collaborating, oh, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
So how do you try to help or
How do I try to help people that are locked into a situation where they think that their own vision of the world is the only natural possible good vision of the world? Oh, okay. What I do in those situations, and they are quite frequent, is I try CNV, right? Nonviolent communication. I try to use them, get them to explain their visions in non-objective ways. I usually start by telling them I don't believe in the existence of facts. This can get them quite strange, and I try to get them to discuss things not in terms of what is, but what they feel are and what the other person feels are, and try to get them to put in their heads this is all equivalent if you disagree with. And this works, but why does this work? This works because I have a huge level of symbolic violence, right? And that's the gist of it. All my solutions to those problems are solutions that are deeply, deeply, deeply ingrained with the fact that I am a person that have the luxury of using them, right? My main solution to this problem is I am. And this in itself is a problem, right? They are not very transferable. Does it make sense? Which gets me to the whole, we should try to create a solution together. And I'm totally open to do that with you if you want. But that's the thing. Anything else? Well, thank you, friends. See you.